Welcome, Victoria. Oh, parent of a graduate this Saturday. Wonderful.
Oh, congratulations.
Welcome, Judith from Maine. My goodness. People from all over the country. That's great. Good deal. We'll start in just a few minutes here.
I did see that quite a few people were getting PACER mailings, and so we're registering as a result of that. So that's wonderful.
Good.
All over the country.
If you haven't had a chance, go ahead and respond to the question on the screen using the chat feature. And you can find your chat down at the bottom of your screen. There's a little word bubble with the word chat. If you are not finding it down there, you might want to look if there's 3 dots with the word more. You might find it there, but most likely it'll be at the bottom of your screen. Welcome, Kim. Nan, Siri, welcome everybody.
Well, should we get started?
I think we should.
Yeah. All right. Well, welcome everyone. We are so pleased to have you here. I am going to go back one slide here. So if you are expecting to be at the Navigating the Path to Financing Post-Secondary Education webinar, you are in the right place. And we are so thrilled that this is a collaborative project between PACER's Minnesota Statewide Family Engagement Center and the University of Minnesota Extension. And we're going to take a little bit of time to learn about each of those organizations. But first, I wanted to introduce myself. I am on the left-hand side there. I'm Sarah Krymans, and I'm an extension educator in West Central Minnesota with the University of Minnesota Extension Center for Family Development. And joining me today, or actually I'm joining her, Lori has provided lead on this project, is Lori Hendrickson, my colleague from Northeast Minnesota, the northern part of the state, in Grand Rapids, right, is where your office is. So that is us. But I also want to introduce Charmin Barrett, our partner with PACER, and she's got a couple slides here to share information about their organization. Charmin?
Thank you so much, Sarah. Hi, good evening. My name is Charmin Davis Barrett, and I'm with the Minnesota Statewide Family Engagement Center, which is a project of PACER Center. If you're familiar with PACER, you know that we are the Parent Training and Information Center for the state of Minnesota. But we also house the Minnesota Statewide Family Engagement Center, which for the past 4 years has been working with families across and professionals across the state of Minnesota, and we've been working with them in the area of regular education. There are a couple of things that are key to our project for the Minnesota Statewide Family Engagement Center. That is that whole area of high expectations for our youth, our children, for their learning. We believe that knowledge is power. So the more information, the more knowledge we can get to families, the better they are prepared to engage in their children's education. We realize that families are their children's first teachers, and they are their first and their best advocates. And through our Minnesota Statewide Family Engagement Center, we focus on diverse communities, the cultural, families with different cultures, different languages, and those who are low income and challenged by economics. So again, what does MinSpec do? An important thing that we do, of course, is help families learn how to advocate within the regular education system. We assist families to increase your knowledge about your rights and responsibilities in regular education. We want you to strengthen your ability to be able to advocate for your child, and sometimes even be able to advocate for yourself as a parent, and then build skills for engagement and effective communication. We assist schools and districts and professionals to increase their knowledge about engaging with families, especially those families from low income, economically and linguistically diverse communities. So in doing that this evening, we've joined together with the University of Minnesota Extension. We're going to help you navigate all of these things that take place in getting your kid in post-secondary education. And so I'm so happy to have Sarah and to have Lori work with you all this evening. So enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you, Charmin. We so appreciate that overview of your organization and all of the great work that you do with families across the state. As I shared earlier, Lori and I are with the University of Minnesota Extension, and our mission is to build a stronger Minnesota through education and research. And so the extension portion of the U really we're the outreach arm of the university, bringing resources out to the state. So oftentimes when people ask, well, where do you work? I say, well, I work for the University of Minnesota Extension. And they're like, oh, well, what campus do you work on? And what programs or degrees do you give? And my response is, I don't work on a campus. I work out in the community, and we do typically non-degreed education such as this. So there we go. So through the University of Minnesota, we really make a difference by connecting community needs and university resources to address critical issues in Minnesota. And so lots of resources, lots of people to tap into at the U to bring information out. Our extension program, actually, I'm going to back up one slide, is comprised of 4 different centers. And on the left-hand side, you see a young lady baking muffins or cupcakes, and she has a 4-H t-shirt on. So youth development, the Center for Youth Development is one of our centers, and they provide education for youth, primarily through the 4-H program, but other ways as well, and helping educators become better youth educators. The turkey, I guess, represents our AFNR, our Ag, Food, and Natural Resources Group. And they, of course, do livestock production and crop production, but marketing and food safety and all kinds of really important things in Minnesota. On the far right-hand side, we see a Main Street there, and we have educators in our Center for Community Vitality that help communities with economic development and leadership development and a whole lot of super cool things. The bottom middle picture is our Center for Family Development. And now I'm going to go to the next slide, and we'll learn a little bit more about that. In our Extension Center for Family Development, we have two basic arms. We have some folks that do a lot of education with food, health and nutrition, food and nutrition, and helping people learn how to be healthy and active. And so they do a great job across the state working with folks, and many of those would be SNAP eligible individuals who participate in their education. And then the other arm is our family resiliency team. I guess if I go with my arm analogy, there's 2 fingers on that arm. We have our family relations folks that do a lot of parent education, relationship education, and helping families and individuals be healthier. Lori and I fit in the other part, looking at resource management, financial capability. And that's why we're here tonight. So our center teaches families and those who serve families to make informed decisions, leading to greater health, resiliency, and well-being. And again, the health and nutrition and the family resiliency, the two parts of our center for family development. All right. These are our objectives for tonight. And you'll notice that throughout the webinar, we're going to be using the language higher education. And the word college might slip in there a little bit, but we really like to talk about higher education, college being one of the options. Tech schools and programs are also very viable options for many of our students today. So please know we're speaking about higher education in a very inclusive way. Beyond just college. So we are hoping that at the end of tonight, you'll be able to recognize the importance of higher education, discuss the importance of that family communication and involvement, gain an understanding of education funding vocabulary, identify options to pay for education, become familiar with some cost worksheets and online calculators, discuss cost reducing higher education strategies, and identify ways to build and practice financial capability as a young adult or as you help your young adults. So Lori.
All right. Thanks, Sarah, for getting us started. So just to give a little bit of background here as to why we're starting off with this, this question. A number of years ago, we had a team that was working on not only, and you'll see post-secondary education here as well. Post-secondary education might come into the conversation a little bit as well, same as higher education, or as Sarah said, once in a while we slip and say college when we're meeting overall higher education. But our team had looked at options in post-secondary or higher education and looking at the high cost and what we could do to help families plan. And one of the basic considerations that we discussed with families in our workshops was the idea of talking about expectations in families. And so I wanted to just start out with this question. Why do you think that post-secondary or higher education is important for your children? So let's start with in the chat. If you haven't found the chat pod yet, on your toolbar, you should see chat. If you don't see it there, you may have to go to more and click on more for the drop down in order to find the chat. But why do you think it's important as for your children to be involved in higher education? Okay, and we're seeing some comments here. Great. Gail says, learn a marketable skill. Judith, quality of life. Jennifer, your daughter wants to be a veterinarian. That was one of the things I thought I might have been too at one point. Great. Who else? What do you think? So they can get a better job. And certainly, you know, we tend to think a better job and success, right? Mary, approximately 70+% of jobs require some post-secondary credentials. Yeah, it might not be a 4-year degree, but you know there is certainly education that is valued in a number of different jobs. To become more independent, Jody says, and Jamie says, discover what they want to do in life. Molly says, training your degree to be able to provide for themselves. Aaliyah says better financial capabilities. Wonderful. All right. Lots of reasons that you may be talking with your students about higher education and the importance in their life. And so as we go forward, we're also going to be talking about how do you have those conversations with the youth as well, because we certainly want them to have an understanding of what it's what they're taking on, perhaps what the family is sacrificing in some cases. I know when I was in college, I heard a lot of times, Lori, we're already making a sacrifice for you to be there, So there are those things that we need to make sure that we're all on the same page in this discussion. So as we move forward, then as we look at some of the occupation, the 10 fastest growing occupations. Now, this excludes the pandemic recovery period. But as we take a look at some of these careers, our world is changing and the careers that we see are changing as well. If you look at wind turbine technician being the highest number there, nurse practitioners. I have someone in my family who just became a nurse practitioner. That was something I don't think she had thought about previously. Solar photo. Oh, see if I can say this at 6:30 at night. Voltaic installers, right? Yeah, and I put on my notes solar installers. There was a reason for that. Physical therapy assistants, information security analysts. So you see a whole range of different careers, and some that you and I may not have considered when we were looking at career paths. So we may not even know what kind of education each of these requires, and so we may have to do a little bit of educating ourselves as well as to what this would require. If we look again at earnings and unemployment, and this is pretty recent, 2021, so the last school year, we're looking at, sure, with a PhD, you see a doctoral degree up at the top, highest earnings and lowest unemployment rate. But there may certainly be some trade-offs along with those. It may come with high earnings, but there may be high costs of attaining that degree. There may also be situations where in order to maintain your employment, you need to move. And that may not be the case with other professions that maybe don't require as much education. But it looks like there are always positions. It's just where do you want to be with those positions as well. So we may need to be flexible around where we're located. Another consideration students need to think about is the educational requirements and how much education that they would like to be involved in. I know that can be different for all students. Some may do very well in school and still not want to carry on with a 4-year or more program because they just don't see the relevance to their lives and what they want to do. They may be very focused on what they want to do in their education. And so you see that from the doctoral degree down to less than a high school diploma, unemployment rates will vary. But again, we need to look at what students are wanting to commit to and the educational level that they're willing to go forward with as well. Here,
Lori,
this,
Lori, on the
yeah.
go back one slide. Someone
Sure.
asked, "What is a professional degree?" So that's the second one down. So like lawyers and doctors would be the doctoral,
or
they'd be the doctoral, but
no, they wouldn't, because that would be like a PhD. A doctoral degree would be so a professional degree would be something like anything in the medical profession that requires extra education. And sometimes the master's degree types of things get lumped in with the professional degrees too, but in this case, it's broken out.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. This chart then kind of marries what we've just been looking at. And so it's a career pathways tool. And this is from the Minnesota Department of Economic Development, Education. Is that right, sir? Education and Economic Development, DEED. Anyway, I can tell it's evening when we're trying to do this. So you see here the rankings of current occupations and the educational requirements, as well as the wages that are all paired together here. And so you can see the what each of those occupations would require as far as an education. This is a nice tool for students to be aware of. And I think, let's see, we can probably grab that and put that in the chat as well. If not, we will certainly provide it in an email in the next day so that you have these links as well. So give students a place to look, at least to say, hey, this is what I'm interested in. And then you can kind of just roughly look at what the educational requirements would be and what the wages may be. So why are we concerned about these issues? As we think about students and their education and their careers and earnings over time, it's important to consider these aspects as well. And as I mentioned, we had a team that was looking at these issues, and this was about 7 years ago. We were looking at the issue of post-secondary debt and began looking at what was happening and what factors make post-secondary debt different than other debt problems in America. And so the factors that make it different, here you see Americans now owe more on student loans than credit cards. Okay, we'll show you a graphic of that in just a minute. There's a growing need for planning to pay for college. Right now, 6 out of 10 families do not have a plan for how they are going to pay when their child enrolls. And the long-term effects of student loan debt, we know that student loan debt is one of those debts that does not go away in bankruptcy. And so it's a rare situation for debt to not be able to be taken away, but that is one of them that it will not go away. And so we need to be thinking about what we want to incur as far as debt and how to go forward with what our plans are. So if we look at total national consumer debt, Americans now owe more on student loans than they do on credit cards and auto loans. And the only debt category that is larger is mortgage debt. And you see the mortgage debt there is at 69%. And families often do not have a plan of how to pay for that post-secondary education. Students often think that, well, my parents will take care of that. And parents often think that students will work during their time in school. And so it's important that we all get on the same page, as I mentioned earlier. So it's important to remember that we need to have those conversations in the family. I know growing up, my parents told me, it was their opinion that they owed me an education. And so we will help you to the best of our ability to get your education. That's not everyone's opinion. And so we need to, decide family by family what is right for our own situation. And that's why we're looking at these factors. If we take a look at student debt by age in Minnesota, look where oftentimes the majority of the debt lies. You see that 30 to 44 range there is quite high throughout all of the graphs. That's often because parents are taking on that student loan or the debt to help their students get through the programs, right? And so you see that when it gets up to a graduate degree, of course, we're getting older students then at that point too, but we're at 68% for that 30 to 48 range. And we're even in the 45 to 59 range, we're at 58%. So you see that there are people that are making choices to help their young people in their lives and to take on debt in order to help them. Another piece of what we found as our group was studying the situation is that there were trade-offs that young people were making. And in years past, students were able to come out of a program, perhaps a 4-year program, and be able to buy a home, start a family, and get into their career. And many times families or young people were delaying these activities as well. So again, there are implications for everyone going forward in their lives as well.
So Lori, can you go back one slide? I'm curious personally on this graph. Is are these personal student loan debts, or do you suppose some of these people in their 45 to 59 or 60 and older, do you think they may have taken out loans to help children or grandchildren, or is it personal student loan debt?
I think it's a combination of both. And the reason I say that is it says all student loan borrowers.
Yeah.
Now, when we get into talking about different types of loans, we'll take a look at what those possibilities are for the students themselves as well as the parents.
Right. And for me, I think about there are opportunities for our young people to obviously borrow money for education. But wow, when I get to be the 60 plus, there's not going to be too many loans for me to fund my retirement. So families need to be very careful about the debt load they take on to support their young people as well. It's a balance in there somewhere, I imagine.
And it's a difficult, if you feel, as I mentioned, my parents said that we owe you an education. If you hold that value, you're going to help your family in any way that you can to attain that degree, right? Or whatever level of education they're trying to achieve. And so that can be a real pull on our values as to what we're willing to accept in our own lives. And so many families have limited their own retirement planning as a result as well.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, here you can see typical funding sources and percentages for 1 year of one academic year of school for students. You see here we have everything from parental contributions at 39.54. As we go around, college savings plan is 11.07. You see scholarships and grants, 24.95. Student loans, 10.64. Student income and savings, 8.05. And other. I was just looking to see if I had a note about what the other might consist of. So, and I don't have that on my graph here as to what the other consists of. So it gives you an idea of what families are dealing with. If 39%, almost 40% of the first 1 year of school for a student is paid by a parent, that's a good chunk. And I know we have people on here that have multiple children. We were talking before we got started that, if you have multiple children to be paying for, and some of you indicated, oh, I've got one down and, things like that, that's quite a bit if you're helping them at that level. And so we have to look at some other options as well. And as we go forward, we'll be talking about what those options might be. So okay, here we go. I was wondering where my numbers went. Okay, if we look at $31,100 is the national estimate of student loan debt at graduation. 54.6% average total student loan debt to income ratio for a new graduate. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. And 391 is the average monthly student loan payment for the class of 2021. So the second box there with the student loan debt to income ratio, if you're looking at gross income, which I believe this is what they are looking at in this situation, is recommended to be at 36% or less. That's all debt payments divided by the monthly income and then multiplying by 100. If we were looking at their disposable, their net income, we would be looking at their net income or their take home pay. That debt to net would be 15%. So I do think they're talking about the debt to gross based on the figures that we're seeing here, but 54.6% debt to income ratio, when you're thinking of 36% would be what is recommended to be. You're seeing that students are dealing with quite a high debt to income ratio.
So that means, Lori, then that these young graduates or older graduates don't have a lot of room to get a car loan or a mortgage or to carry much credit card debt. They are pretty well maxed out on the student loans by themselves, correct?
Yes, and if you're thinking about what if an emergency occurs and you're already dealing with this level of debt, could you afford to deal with, let's say, a medical emergency or something on that order? So that's putting students in a situation of being very strapped, and could they handle an emergency if they needed to handle that at a given time? If we look at Minnesota's situation, we're looking at the cost in Minnesota. We see that the average tuition, we have community college tuition listed here at $5,540, out of state being $6,300, and in-state four-year public school, that's tuition and fees at $11,733. If we look at the total cost to live on a campus, that's $15,396. And these are our 2020 numbers. I believe we haven't got the 2021 yet, as far as the past school year. So we should be getting information on that soon. And then average debt of Minnesota graduates is a little bit higher than that national average. We're at $32,012 across all types of educational institutions. So whether you're dealing with that 2-year college or 4-year college, students may still be taking on a debt to get through a program. And so the average across Minnesota would be that 32,000. And yeah, I see Kimberly in top 20 most expensive states for tuition. Yeah, it's quite expensive when it comes to, well, and when you're looking at the amount of debt that students carry as they leave, we often see Minnesota is in that upper range as well. So I mentioned that we share this so your family can make the best plan. We really want people to be able to figure out what's going to work for their situation. And here is a tool, the College Scorecard.ed.gov. So this will help to look at institutions. You can look at fields of study that might be of interest and say, show me the options, and take a look at what might fit best. So that is, and I see Sarah put it in the chat, so you can check those out on your own. And again, we'll provide you these links as well so that you have all of them going forward and do some good planning. So we threw in some university campuses on the scorecard just to give an example. And so in this case, we might be looking at U of M campuses, but we could, further narrow the choices if we wanted to by which campus offered the programs that we were interested in. But in this way, you can see what the cost might be. And if it seemed too costly, for example, you could change the search, maybe find programs that might be less costly, or other programs that had comparable costs if they're dealing with several interests as they're considering a program. And so from a tool like this, you can actually go ahead and start making some choices.
When there's a lot of information on this chart as well, my eye is drawn to that graduation rate. I do a lot of financial counseling with a variety of people, and when they lay out their debts and they have student loan, one of the questions I often ask is, did you get the degree? Do you have the degree? And sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. So keeping an eye on that prize and finishing the degree is really important to have something to show for that investment.
Yeah, definitely. And, Sarah knows that I've got two nephews right now that are coming into this situation right now of making choices. One is a senior and one is a junior. And so, trying to make those decisions and, the program you want to do. And there might be several campuses you're looking at. So you can plug that information in and find what might work best for you. And then, you're not running all over the state to try to find, to visit until you know that maybe there's something there for you and to start helping to narrow things down a little bit. So it's kind of a nice process to get us started. So there are items we would want to make sure that you're considering too as educational expenses, and we might have some trade-offs too as you look at some of these, the tuition and fees, room and board, as we go through all of the list here. Perhaps a child decides that they want to live at home to attend a nearby program, and that would be beneficial, as far as saving on an apartment, room and board, those kinds of things. But there may be other costs that come into play as well, such as driving, the transportation piece, the parking permits, things like that would they would need to pay as well, or maybe even public transportation costs. So there may be some trade-offs along the way, and we just want you to make sure to think about all the costs that might be involved in getting that education as well. So let's take a minute and chat a little bit again about how you will talk with your children about planning for their higher education. How do you think you might go about that, or what do you think you might talk about related to the conversation we're having tonight? As you're doing that, I'll just mention too, and when we've done these workshops in person, we've put parents on one side of the room and children on the other side of the room. And we did what we called a snowball activity. And we had parents say, what do you think is important in this process? Or what do you think you want your parent to know about your feelings about higher education? And then the parents would write down, what they thought they wanted their students to know about higher education planning. And so then we would have them crumple up the piece of paper and throw it across the room at the parents, and the parents do the same. And then parents open up and take a look at what the students are thinking, and students are opening up those messages as well. And it may not be the one directly from their parent, but it's important to think about all the different messages that are going back and forth in families. And so it's kind of a fun activity to talk about those things as well. So I saw a couple of comments up here. What do we have?
I can help you out, Lori. Kimberly said affordability, their personal goals, parental expectations, budget. Mary indicated talk about hopes and dreams, strengths and interests. And Mary continued a budget for students for post-secondary education, and what are the expectations for students?
Yeah.
Donna said, how do we reach your goals and how do we pay for it? And then Jennifer did have a question earlier about reciprocity between Minnesota and other states. I responded, I think it's primarily neighboring states.
Right.
And typically it's not the same usually as in-state tuition, but it's a little less than the out-of-state tuition rate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it typically would be around Minnesota. You'd see Wisconsin, Iowa, North and South Dakota. Probably that would be the ones with reciprocity across the border. Yeah, Mary says Wisconsin, North Dakota. Great. Yeah. So any other? Oh, Iowa does not. Oh, okay. I see Julene says, what are the employment options with the degree program they're interested in? Okay, yes. Yeah, it's certainly important to have those conversations and make sure that everybody is understanding where we're at and what our thoughts are related to this. So we'll get more into that as well. But We certainly appreciate you chatting with us. And Sarah, want to continue?
Thank you, Lori. That question leads right into this part of the conversation, and how that family involvement in conversation is so important. So that positive family environment is really crucial for student development in so many ways, right? Having the skills to study and focus, and having that can-do attitude, and also I think learning how to deal with stress and work through some of those challenges, because geez, not every college class is super easy, and on occasion some of us might fail a class, and how do we persevere and pull ourselves up and figure out how to navigate that and experience success when we need to get through some of those classes. That school performance, it's good behavior, right? Turning assignments in on time. Have students experienced that in high school, or were teachers pretty lax? And grades, was there a challenging grading system that they were used to? And having social relationships, and that someone mentioned earlier that post-secondary education time, higher education time, is really valuable for maturation. Our young people's brains and they're not mature till mid-20s. Boys a little later than girls as well. But this piece is just so very, very important, having supportive families. And yet there are many examples of young folks who have been super successful despite not having this. So, but there's great benefits in having the family involvement. So why financial literacy or capability? So it's important to know before you go. Having that plan, what are those education costs? Do you, or is there a plan? Was there a plan to save money? Was there a plan for the young person to work? And so how much is needed then above and beyond that? Is there a discussion on how to repay loans? I connected with a woman who recently co-signed a student loan for a stepson, and the stepson walked out on that student loan and she was stuck with it. And so anytime parents or others are considering co-signing a student loan, you really need to have those conversations with the young person on what does this mean. If you make payments on your student loan, it's good for both of our credit histories, but if you don't, it's bad for both of us, and there can be some major ramifications with that. Also looking at anticipated future earnings. Lori referenced earlier on one of the charts that some of those really high paying jobs, they have much more student loan debt that can help with that repayment. But if we have young people that are accumulating a lot of debt and working on a degree that doesn't pay very much, they're going to find themselves backed into a corner and in having some challenges with the repayment. Also understanding how to minimize the negative consequences of excessive debt. When we looked at that debt to income ratio piece earlier, that's really telling, right? So having folks do a little dreaming about what is life going to look like when you get out of school. On occasion, I hear young people who describe the life that their parents are living, and that's the life that they want when they graduate from post-secondary education. And yet it's taken their parents 20, 30, 40 years to achieve that level of living. And so understanding some of that. Also, financial literacy really helps us acquire tools and resources to strengthen money management skills to prepare for future financial well-being. As simple as, has the young person had a checking account and a savings account, and have they balanced it? Have they been responsible for ensuring that they didn't get overdrafts, and or were there bailouts that someone just kind of topped off that account when they dipped below zero? Do they have experience perhaps using a credit card and demonstrating that good behavior of using restraint when using it, and then paying it off on a monthly basis, and having the skills to not accumulate a lot of debt that can be really challenging as folks are in school and as they near graduation. Lori, I think every webinar that we do, like 90% of them, we talk about wants and needs and priorities. And I think in our elementary teachers in kindergarten and first grade, we start talking about this. And I think it's so very appropriate for parents to have conversations with their young people on what are those basic needs and what are those wants? What does college life look like for you, right? Are
And
you going
Sarah,
to
excuse me, I was just going to say, as you were talking about what is life going to look like, I added into the chat jumpstart.org. The Jumpstart Coalition has the reality check, and that can help students to look at a level of living and what they're anticipating their life is going to be like. And then it also links to careers that might pay the wages necessary for that career, or for that lifestyle, I should say. And, a couple of times that I've asked students after they've completed it, does this match with what you think, is this a career that you might possibly consider? Yeah, that sounds like something I would do. And so it's really kind of interesting to see. Sometimes they're right on track with what they're thinking, and other times it's, pie in the sky. I'm going to have the hot sports car and, buy everything I want. And so that really is an important conversation.
Definitely, definitely. I'm just, thanks, Lori. You gave me a moment to pause and look at the chat as well here. Mary, I so appreciate your comment that being able to manage and organize time with a less structured day, right? Many of our young people have been scheduled from rolling out of bed to when they fall back into bed at the end of the night. And many times it's orchestrated by parents, not always, right? But is the young person able to budget their time, right, for eating and sleeping and studying and being in the classroom, and being accountable for those assignments and getting them in, right, without someone standing beside them saying, oh, do you have that done? Is it ready to go? So there's a lot of maturity that needs to happen, and we can help young people experience some of those challenges and some of those natural consequences as well when they're younger, as they go forward. Julene, you are correct. Remember, as a parent, you are a role model for your child, and even if we may not talk about some things intentionally with our young people, they are absorbing a lot. They're watching how we manage money, how we spend, how we save, all of those sorts of things. Yeah, definitely great things. So having those conversations with the young person before they go to school, what does that look like to you? What are your needs and what are your wants? A roof over your head and food on the table is important. Um, I had a niece that went to college, and she lived in the newest dorm on campus, which was considerably more expensive than one of the older dorms on campus. And then when she moved out, she lived in a brand new apartment building that was right off campus, that was much more expensive than some of the older apartment buildings, and all great options, right? But how does that fit in? And so are some of those newer constructions, are those wants or are they needs? And then identifying the priorities. What's most important, right? Getting the degree, right? but where are we going to live, and how are, and what school do we go to? And is 1 degree, I saw someone in the chat, Gail, you talked about state schools are just as good and better than some of the private schools, but both both of your kids chose private. So you're talking into matter. I'm hoping that you had that conversation about, okay, well, there's perhaps a difference in the cost there. Sometimes I hear people say, well, they had lots of scholarships and grants uh, to make it equal. And I think that's kind of that, I don't know if it's a bait and switch, but it really entices people to get in the door. And are those resources going to be available in subsequent years as well? So I don't know, continue to put your thoughts and comments in the chat, because I encourage parents to err on having this conversation in a variety of ways, and in a variety of at a variety of times, for sure. All right. So just like we talk about wants and needs and priorities, we almost always talk about SMART goals. And people may be familiar with these: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. And so we're looking at wanting and needing to set aside dollars and help fund that education. We can frame those in this way. Specific, what do you want to accomplish? The who, what, where, and why. Measurable, how will you demonstrate and evaluate the extent to which the goal has been met? Achievable, set the goals that stretch and challenge, but that can be accomplished. I know, well, I was going to say, I know my family would have been super challenged to have sent our kids to Harvard or to, an Ivy League school with huge tickets. And so would that be achievable? I don't know. We would have to do a lot of work to come up with a lot of supports to make something like that happen. Relevant, and set the goal that matters to you and are a variety and a priority in your life. And then time bound, again, setting the, here we go. Kimberly's comment popped right up on my screen, so I had to move it. Time bound, set goals that have a defined time frame, including one or more deadline dates. Kimberly, you've been doing some research, so you found the Grand Canyon University the most affordable 4-year college that you could find, private, all-in costs for the entire year. So no 4-year schools were comparable. I'd be curious about the other factors, right? What was the graduation rate? Are they accredited in the programs that they offer? Just a variety of things to consider. Price or cost is definitely one of the big ones that we look at, but we want to look at all of those pieces for sure. All right. Here we go. So we encourage families to use a decision-making process and to pause as they're going through this, to make sure that they hit all of the pieces of this decision-making process or model. So first, identify the issue or decision to be made. So, it might be to get a good job when the young person graduates, or it might be to get a degree to be a elementary teacher, or what is the issue, right? So that's the first one. Then to determine the alternatives. And that's when we start looking at what's out there, what's available. And this is always it's kind of like window shopping, right? You're looking at the various schools that are available, and you start identifying those. Yeah, Kim, definitely online post-secondary education is a new consideration. So an option for getting some of those generals. And also thinking about, for some students, that could work really well. Other students may not, their learning style may not be conducive to online education. All right, so number 2 here, determining alternatives. Number 3 looks at pros and cons of each alternative. And I really, actually, I would almost add a piece in here to identify the criteria. Which pieces are really important? Is it cost? Is it the social life at the campus? Is it that the program has a high graduation rate, that they place a certain number of their students, or a certain number of their students not only graduate but move directly into degrees? Or is it because they've got a beautiful campus and it's very peaceful? I mean, so there's lots of things you need to figure out what's most important as you're making those decisions. So yeah, you weigh the pros and cons for each of those criteria, and each of the alternatives. And so very true, Mary, right? So if one of your criteria is that disability services are available on campus, right? That's going to rank right up there, and you'll be able to elevate or move some schools down on that list. So then number 4, selecting that best alternative, implement the decision, and evaluate the decision. Someone referenced, and I don't have the list up in front of me, that that the online schools is a great way to do some of those generals, right? Or some people might say the local community college is a great way to do some of those generals at a lower cost as well. And so I think the nice thing about this process is that it can be evaluated, semester by semester, year by year. And are we on track, or do we need to shift gears? Ideally, we'd like to pick a program that works for us, but so many students will shift at the end of a semester, or at the end of year 1 or year 2. And adjusting course, I think, is just pretty natural as young people identify that, oh, I really wanted to be the veterinarian and I absolutely hated the animal science classes, or I thought I was going to be a nurse and I did a intro class and I just can't stand the sight of blood, right? Or the math in the engineering program was really hard. I think that maybe is not they're not the road that I need to take. So continually working through this decision-making process. Lori, I think I'm going to pass it back to you.
All right. And so the next thing is looking at, what do we do to reduce those post-secondary education costs? And thinking about all the possibilities for options. And what Mary was saying is flexibility is essential. I think, creativity is essential as well in some of these things. So think about all of the possibilities. We want you and your kids to think about what might help minimize the costs, and getting them involved in what works for them. As Sarah said, it might be using the community college as a way to, if they're home during the summer or something on that order, maybe a community college is offering some classes at a lower rate, something like that you can do that. To take advantage of those and minimize some of the costs. But we're looking at a variety of things here, and you see post-secondary option, career assessments, remedial courses, career orientation and counseling, those college level examination programs, military service. And, as I said, creativity is a big portion of it here. So you probably have a lot of other ideas as well.
I'm going to jump in here. Mary, thank you for sharing company tuition reimbursement. Yeah. My son-in-law works for a company, and I'm not going to name what the company is, but he has done very well in his career without having a bachelor's degree. And he's working on that now in his 30s. And because of the company he works for, he's paying $1 a day for his education. So $365 for the year for the tuition. And so figuring out where are the best places. And at that company, it's everyone up and down the line that would qualify for those benefits.
That's a really great thing. And, I think with a variety of organizations too, you may end up that you are required to stay for a period of time based on that educational availability too. So I know that there are organizations that will do that. But yeah, that's a great option to take advantage of. So if we look at going forward here, let's look at the post-secondary enrollment option. That was the first one that was on that list. And I did put in the chat readysetgo.mn.gov. That is the site that we're finding all of this information on right now. In Minnesota, there are several options for high school students to earn some college credit prior to graduation. And so PSEO is probably the one that's the most popular among students. This allows juniors and seniors, and in fact, sometimes even sophomores, to take courses at a college tuition free of charge. Or at a college tuition free. And so we want students to think about that. That's tuition, fees, and textbooks that are all free of charge. Okay. PSEO coordinator at a college or a high school counselor can help and tell you a little bit more about what is available near you. And on this page, again, the Ready, Set, Go website is shown here, and it's in the chat as well. There are a variety of other options that are detailed on this site as well. They talk about concurrent enrollment, so being enrolled as a high school student as well as a college student at the same time. Advanced placement, we saw that on the previous slide as well, that there may be an advanced placement option. Career and technical education. I know I saw Jolene on here earlier, and I know she's aware of that CTE program, and many of our family and consumer science teachers are involved in the CTE programs across the state. And what I had not had any familiarity with is International Baccalaureate. Now, I cannot even tell you what that program involves, but it is on this Ready, Set, Go website as well. So you might want to investigate all of these options. The advanced placement is a wonderful thing if you're able to do some work in advanced placement levels of courses and gain a little bit more advanced. Another one that we saw was CLAP. The college level examination program. And there are fees for things like that. But, if a student feels that they can take the test and would be able to test out of it, it may be a nice option to save some money because you wouldn't have to pay for the full course. You would just pay the testing fees as well. So that is an option as well to consider. Many options that students can look at. One thing I would say about post-secondary option, if students are doing this, and I've had several people in my family that have taken advantage of this, it is a nice option to finish an AA degree, an associate's degree, about the same time that you finish your high school diploma. But if you are then going on to, say, a four-year college, you would want to make sure that everything's going to transfer the way you intend it to, and also that you are not having to repeat any courses along the way. So otherwise, you might end up finding that the PSEO courses that you took, it may not have benefited you in terms of saving money going forward. All right, we also want students to think about limiting debt accumulation. And let's see. So we want people to choose a school carefully, think about those estimated costs, also maximizing other funding sources. And we're going to talk more about this. And thinking about work before and during enrollment. And limit living expenses. We have Live Like a Student on here. That was a campaign that was done by the University of Minnesota a number of years ago. And they reminded students that they didn't need to have, when we were talking about needs and wants, think about what those priorities are in your life. And now is the time to, maybe scale back a little bit, live like a student, like you've always heard students live. Do that now so that you can have the life that you want later. And so along with that, there were financial education courses and various other options available to students as they were going through their programs. We want students to practice their smart borrowing, to compare loans, to understand the loan terms, and to keep tabs on their borrowing and to understand what the earning potential is. Now, I mentioned the team that I was a part of a number of years ago on talking with youth and parents about paying for post-secondary education. And another offshoot project of that was some focus groups, and as a result, some text messages that were sent to students related to whether or not they understood information that was in their financial aid package as they graduated. Understanding those loans and understanding when they needed to repay and some things like that. So it was really interesting to be a part of the focus groups to see what happened. And for many students, they indicated that as a exit interview for their college loans, what they ended up doing was just getting an online, basically another course, just an online course that they had to click through. And many didn't pay close attention to those things like understanding the loan terms and when they needed to begin repayment and those types of things. So as a result, we ended up sending some text messages with some links so that they could keep track of all of that information as they began their repayment or were getting ready to repay, I should say. So the next thing is we want students to be thinking about saving. As Sarah talked about the SMART goals, basically this is talking about SMART goals here. Decide a goal and a time frame, determine the amount to save each month, and make savings easy. Find a way that works for you. It might be paying yourself first by putting that, having that amount automatically withdrawn and deposited into another account. Being frugal, that's the idea of live like a student. The simple things like saving change, that can start out a savings habit, especially if students haven't done that before. Tracking their expenditures to see, where they're spending their money and really understanding where their money is going, and having an emergency fund. And so those are some activities we'd like young people to be thinking about as they are going forward, other ways that you can be saving. And this is a really interesting study and Sarah and I both participated in a webinar where one of our colleagues in the Association for Financial Counseling and Planning Education talked about children with savings for college. It can be anywhere between $1 and $490, so under $500 virtually, are 3 times more likely to enroll in college than a child with no savings, and more than 4.5 times more likely to graduate. That's impressive. And only 5% of low to moderate income children with no savings will graduate, while 25% with that under $500 worth of savings will graduate. And 33% of those with 500 or more set aside will graduate. It made me think of an article that, it was a book that I had read and had co-authored a book review on. And it was how students, it's called The Real College Debt Crisis, How Student Borrowing Threatens Financial Wellbeing and Erodes the American Dream. And in the book, they talked about a child savings account, or they called it a CSA, and communication also as a way of promoting what they called a child saver identity early and providing time to establish savings. So again, with that idea that a student would have, and it wouldn't matter, it wouldn't have to be a great deal of savings, but to start them on that path and also to promote that idea with them that they're, that someone in the family maybe is saving towards their education to help them to gain that child saver and that education identity to help move them forward towards this path. Okay. And then we kind of wanted to look, we'd never do the whole FAFSA kind of a workshop. That is not our niche in all of this, but we certainly want you to take a look at all the options related here. And so as we look at completing the FAFSA, there will be several financial aid options that result. And here you see identified the grants and scholarship, loans, and work study. And as we said, we want students to go for that free money that does not need to be repaid first. And we'll take a look at some of those pieces as we go as well. Okay, the FAFSA. Basically, again, we aren't going to be teaching you how to do the FAFSA or anything like that, but we do want to share a few tips. One tip is to file your income tax as soon as possible after the 1st of January during the last year of high school for your son or daughter and every year thereafter. We know that will help to get a quicker response. You see there that the requirement for eligibility for FAFSA is that you are a U.S. citizen, a permanent resident, or a refugee. But you see also that FAFSA starts with filling out the form in January, and the quicker response will be coming when you submit it online. So earlier in the year, and then also if you're submitting online, then you're apt to get a quicker response and kind of know where you're at. FAFSA does need to be reviewed each year, and parents and students can have a PIN number related to their information so that they can look at their account and information. And want to just tell you too that as a result of doing some of these workshops in person in the past, we have heard some good things that parents have shared about what they do. And one parent, I can vividly remember a parent saying, well, I keep a notebook of all the stuff that I share, in terms of the FAFSA, and I keep all the information so I don't have to try to remember it the next year. And I think another thing that it could easily be done is to make a copy, maybe save a PDF of the form if you're doing it online. That way you would have that information at hand, just keep it on the computer. And so you would have the information going forward. But I think it's scary for parents too, to be thinking about FAFSA, like, oh, my kid's education depends on this, whether they get financial aid or not. And so I heard a lot of anxiety from parents thinking about the FAFSA and just getting that completed. So I like when parents are willing to share tips as well in what they've done. I think it's so important to share those as they go forward in preparing the form themselves. Here you see two different sites. Actually, it's the same site. They both take you to the same location. I want to point out too that there is no charge for completing FAFSA. That's one thing that we heard from parents too, is that very often parents would receive emails or texts about, we know you have a student graduating and complete the FAFSA now and things like that. And there would be a .com or there would be a cost associated with it. There is no cost for completing FAFSA. It is free. And just make sure that when you are going to fill out the paperwork, that you are not going to a .com. It should say, and it should be a .gov site that you're coming up to. And it should be also a secure site, an HTTPS. And so recognize that when you are completing the materials.
And Lori, Mary is sharing in the chat as well that one of the nice newer features is how to directly connect to the IRS for some of the required FAFSA data when applying online. So if you're able to do that connect, that it just really helps with filling in the right numbers.
Yeah, and that didn't used to happen. So that is a really nice feature to have access to. All right. And as we think about, again, grants and scholarships are the money that you don't have to repay. And so we want for young people to be looking at these things first. Grants, you see federal Pell Grants might range from $639 to around $6,345. Minnesota state grant average is about $2,600. And then Minnesota post-secondary child care grant is something that is available just related to child care. And also in, let's see, I was just looking for I had the 2020 numbers here, I thought. So yeah, in 2020, approximately 29% of state grant recipients had family incomes of below $20,000. 39% had incomes between $20,000 and $50,000. 32% had incomes over $50,000. So that was Minnesota data as well. Thinking about scholarships, an important thing to know is that there may be scholarships that go unused. I have seen some of the organizations that offer scholarships, foundations and such, late into the spring, asking people to apply for their scholarships because they did not have enough people to actually, make a decision on a scholarship award in a given year. And so it's important to take that extra time. If you can find a scholarship that will fit for a student, it might be a profitable thing just to take a little time and do some searching, maybe searching by potential schools, search by educational program, or maybe even search by your geographical area or the area of where the student intends to go to school. And so there are plenty of scholarships out there that go unused. Just take a little extra time and try to find something. And there's some unusual scholarships out there too. So there may just be a match, a fit for a student that you might not expect. So again, they may be available within the scholarship in the school or the community. Oftentimes they are awarded for grades, sports, or arts. But other scholarships, such as Department of Education, some community-based agencies, again, those foundations, professional organizations and companies, and scholarships from Army, Navy, Air Force, veterans offices, and reserve officers training, the ROTC program might be available as well. So all good sources of where to look for scholarships. This is something that's fairly new, and this is available only 2022, so this year through 2024, or until the funds are gone, they say. And it's the Minnesota Future Together Grants. So this is tuition-free pathways in high-need career areas. So this was due to the situation around COVID, those areas, career areas that were found to be high need, and maybe we didn't have enough people to fill professions. And so just reading from some of the information on that page, they talk about that obtaining a career being critical for future career opportunities and total lifetime earnings. Unfortunately, too often the cost of a program may be a barrier for too many Minnesotans. And so this is a new program eligible. It says for earning a certificate, diploma, associate's degree, or bachelor's degree at any public institution in the state of Minnesota. So you can go to, and I think we'll make sure this is a huge link here. So we'll make sure we get that one to you in an email tomorrow, because I don't think any of us can type in that quickly. So just interesting to note that there were some educational implications here as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, and seeing those career paths where people may not typically be going into some of these, or there may not be enough people in an area. So take advantage of some of those kinds of things too. Taking a look at loans, and we're going to go through this pretty quickly because I know we're coming up on the end of our time here. But we're looking here at federal loans. You see the Stafford, either subsidized or unsubsidized, and the PLUS loans. The PLUS loans are the parent loans. Those are federal parent loans for undergraduate students. So that's how you get PLUS out of that. And the state loans are Minnesota, the South loan, that's a long-term low-interest student loan. Okay, again, it's administered by the state of Minnesota. And then, of course, private loans, banks, and credit unions offer loans as well. And take a look at what the interest rates are on these various options for students, and so that they are well aware of what each provides and what the interest rate might be on all of those as well. All right, and looking at some other possibilities, there are other options for sources of money as well. The American Opportunity Tax Credit is a credit for qualified education expenses paid for an eligible student in the first 4 years of higher education. And you can get a maximum annual credit of $2,500 per student. So be aware of that as you are doing tax preparation. Also, individual development accounts. That's a match savings program to help lower income people to reach financial independence. And education is one of the potential goals that you could have related to an individual development account. And there are often financial education courses that go along with those programs as well. A 529 plan is another possibility, an investment where anyone can contribute to savings for a student. And that can be used anywhere. You may have a 529 in Minnesota, but that doesn't mean it needs to just be used in Minnesota as well. You may also have loans from family members. There may be part-time work or loans, again, as we said, from other banks and credit unions. And so there are other options as well. But we always want students to remember, use that money that doesn't have to be paid back first before accessing other types of financial aid.
When Lori Mary is just populating the chat with a lot of really great information, and she's saying there are some potential new Minnesota grants for specific degree seekers for high demand jobs. It's proposed this legislative session, so we'll keep your eye on that. Maybe contact your legislators if that moves you to do so. And she said there's also some new state grants available for Minnesota students who were in foster care. So what a great way to help those students move forward with their education.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thanks, Mary, for sharing those. All right, Sarah.
There we go. I muted myself too quickly there. We have 4 minutes till the top of the hour, so I'm gonna move us through this really quick. It's important for our young students to develop a good credit history, and one way to do that is to get a secured credit card and using it responsibly, perhaps buying gas and groceries and then paying it off in full every month, and working with the behavior of paying those bills on time and to not max out those cards is really important. So credit reports, real quickly, again, it's a history of your credit transactions, and it talks about who you are and what kind of current credit do you have with credit cards, mortgages, student loans, car loans. It also pulls information from public records, so court judgments against an individual, any tax liens, any inquiries about one's credit. So in addition to learning the English and the sciences and all of those things, we also want our young people to establish this credit history, because they most likely are going to need to qualify for loans. They may need to get a car loan down the road, or get a mortgage, and so this is part of that journey in establishing that positive credit history. Credit scores are based on the information in the report, so you can see the factors that are looked at there. I think in the next round, well, actually, we do have a webinar coming up about credit, and I'll point that out in a minute. So I'm not going to go into detail here. So when we think about education as a reality, we really want to support and foster and help those students succeed at school. It's so important to have that effective communication, to make sure everyone is understanding what the other person is thinking, and to discuss shared commitment between parents and the student. Are we on the same page, right? Are you thinking the same thing I am? Because I can't pay 100% of your education. So what is the plan? Matching those educational goals to career objectives, learning about options, and identifying ways to manage resources is so very important. I'm going to skip that one. We will be sharing information in a variety of ways. Lori, I want you to describe, because you've got the details. They're going to get information from a few different directions. So can you describe that?
Sure. And I was just typing in the chat as well that if you received an email from me today asking for you to share your physical address, we've got packets of handouts that are coming to you, and some record keeping materials that Pacer is sharing. And then we will also be sending you an incentive pack of some family financial materials as well. So we need to have physical addresses in order to get those out to you. So you will see on the screen, you've got the scholarship strategies, funding your education, where to start, and a college budget. College is what it says on there, but we know all post-secondary education budget. So those will be coming to you, as well as the record keeping materials that will be in a packet being mailed from Pacer, from Minnesota Family Engagement Center. And then you will receive another packet with our incentive, with some financial education materials and fun little things as well.
Thank you, Lori. And so Lori will be putting her email in the chat here, but also those that we didn't get mailing addresses from, check your email and get that to Lori so you can receive those great resources. This is just a summary of our objectives that we had at the beginning. In 90 minutes, we're just touching the surface, right? So we're hoping that we're helping folks feel just a little bit more confident as they start this journey. If you need a certificate of participation, no worries, we can provide that. And in order to get one, you can complete this evaluation. And we ask, even if you don't need a certificate of participation, please take a few moments to give us some feedback on the webinar. Was 90 minutes too long, too short? Maybe we should have done 4 1-hour sessions, or dug deeper on some topics, or give us some feedback on that. We will also provide this link in a follow-up email. Lori did put it in the chat too. Approximately 30 days after the end of this series, we will be sending a follow-up email to see how you've used the information and resources. In addition, so watch for this email. The best part of it is we're going to be providing a playlist of all the recorded webinars in this series. So you can listen to it again, and we'll be providing a PDF of the slides as well. So you'll have that, or you could share it with a partner who perhaps wasn't able to participate. So some upcoming webinars, and we will provide links to these in the follow-up email as well. Some of our Spanish speaking colleagues are offering some great parenting related types of webinars. So there's those. A couple popular ones coming up in our family friendly earth care series, looking at pollinators and foraging. And we have a few in finding balance on physical fitness, and a conversation about how Somali grocery stores have been used to communicate COVID vaccinations. I have got to move that little guy there because he is covering up my vaccination word. And then also some developmental affirmations. And this one might be like super great as you're supporting your young people. So consider this one: words that help for any age, every stage. So that one looks super great. We also have some related to housing and recovery and health. We'll be getting these out to folks. And then this webinar fit in our making sense of it all. So the first two were today. So we will provide the links. This link at the bottom will get you to our University of Minnesota Extension website, where you can find these webinars and others from our other centers across Extension. We will also be sharing with you via the email some social media links. So connect with us. If you're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, YouTube, LinkedIn, down at the bottom, we have a link to subscribe to our Family News e-newsletter, which will keep you connected with us. So here is Charmin's contact information. And again, you'll be getting these slides. And you can subscribe to their newsletter on their website at pacer.org/FE for family engagement. So great to have. Whew, just 4 minutes over. Any final comments, thoughts? We've so appreciated all of the conversation in the chat and sharing of resources.
Lots of good conversation. And as I said, so many times it's parents supporting parents in just sharing the information that they have learned in their process. And so we appreciate you all being a part of tonight and for joining us, and look forward to your journey through higher education with your young people.
I think Lori and I and Charmin will hang out here for a few minutes. We could probably stop the recording, and we invite folks, if you just want to unmute yourselves at this time, or if you're ready to go get your supper if you didn't get any earlier. But thanks so much for joining us.